Hi, I'm Andrea Deer with the Whole Kit and Caboodle. Today's question is from Jennifer in Cincinnati, Ohio. Jenny asks, when you design a layout, do you start your design with the die cuts first, or do you pick the papers first? Oftentimes the hardest part of any task is that initial step of getting started. As scrapbookers, we have piles of photos and years of memories to put to paper, but when we sit down to scrapbook, where do we even begin? That first step is going to be different for many scrapbookers. Some will start with a sketch, others with a paper collection, and some will start by picking out primary colors from their photos. Some scrapbookers will think logically and start with a plan, and others are more free-form. Here's what works for me. Once I have my photos and my topic, my very first step might actually surprise you. The first thing I do is brainstorm titles for the page. Now this could be very simple, just like Indiana State Fair or whatever the event name is, or it can be a little more complex where I love to play on words. Aesthetically, for me, I love having a title on every page. So once I have a general idea for the titles, I begin my design on the computer. As a graphic artist, the computer is my comfort zone. I was taught to design anything from a magazine to a billboard by starting at the computer. If you don't feel like your computer skills are quite as savvy to start your design on the computer, a great substitution for this would be to start with a sketch. I start my design in Cricut Design Space, and I begin by adding a 12 by 12 box that will serve as my sample page layout. I do this so that I'm sure to stay in the confines of the page sizes because it can be hard to judge the size of an item by just looking at the screen. If I have an exact photo size, I'll go ahead and add them to the file. That way, when I design the artwork, I'm sure to work around their sizes. Now the fun part. In Cricut Design Space, I will search for images using either a general term for the theme of my photos or something very specific if I have an exact idea in mind. There are thousands and thousands of images in Design Space, so limit yourself. Don't get stuck going down that rabbit hole. I will click the Cut Only Files in multiple layers so that it will somewhat narrow down the choices. I choose no more than 5 images to start. I'll keep arranging the die cuts until I'm satisfied with the layout. At this point, I'm not worrying about colors, only about the aesthetics of where I want things placed around my potential photos. Now that I have my photos ready to go, I have my electronic file with my digital images ready to go. The next step is picking out the pattern papers. For me, this is my absolute favorite part of putting together a scrapbooking spread. As you know, I can spend hours on selecting pattern papers. We have an entire series dedicated on how to choose and mix and match different pattern papers, so I won't go into a lot of detail here, other than to say, don't limit yourself. Don't automatically disregard a paper. At this stage of the game, pull every single pattern paper in your stash that you think will coordinate with your colors and with your theme. Once I have a general idea of the papers, then I'll go back to my file and I'll update the colors of each images accordingly. Typically by the time that I cut the images out on my Cricut machine, I have spent 1 to 2 hours in the design process. Now, of course, some come quicker and some take a lot longer. It's not unheard of for me to have to sit on a design overnight and actually come back the next day with a fresh set of eyes. But once I cut those images out on my machine and have all of my papers together, it's pretty rare that there are any major changes. For me, the crucial part of the process is that time I have spent at the computer in arranging those images on my digital layout. Now that you've seen the process, take a look at the completed spread. Hopefully that gives you a little peek into my process of how I design a scrapbooking page. How about you? I'd love to know what your first step is when you sit down to design your page, outside of starting with one of our page kits, of course. We can all be inspired from and learn so much from each other. I know that I am constantly inspired by you. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's Ask Andrea, and as always, happy scrapping.